The Brussels Report podcast.
Welcome to a new episode of the Brussels Report podcast. My name is Pieter Cleppe. I'm the editor-in-chief of BrusselsReport.eu, and I'm delighted to have as my guest Polish MEP, Professor Krasnodębski. Welcome, Professor.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
It's a real pleasure. I think we know each other for quite some time. You have been a very solid supporter of reform of the European Union, one of the most prominent, I should say, in the European Parliament. And of course, since last year, we have this new exercise, the Conference on the Future of Europe. And you're also playing a big role in that. So to start right on with it, what is your thoughts on this whole exercise?
You see, there was experiment to engage the citizens more directly in the discussion about the future of Europe. We all have, I think, feeling that there is a need to adapt our policies, but also, I would say, maybe also institutional framework to the new needs in Europe. And so this is, as we know, it was announced by Ursula von der Leyen when she became the chair president of the European Commission to start this. It was also supported by President Sassoli, this idea, and now we are, I think, finishing our work. I must say, a little disappointed because there's no really. I hope that it would be the bigger interest among the European citizens. That we know that there are many controversies and differences, and sometimes many times I meet the citizens, and I wanted also to hear this and to see this diversity of opinion. But unfortunately, it is, according to me, it is more very official exercise, and also the recommendation now, which are formulated by the citizens panels, are not really something new. They are the same proposal as we know from since many years. Sometimes they are not realistic, and what probably is also very characteristic that it shows that also many of the citizens really doesn't know the EU as it is, and how it is constructed, and how we have to balance different interests, and also this that it is a community also of member states, not only of the citizen. So it's generally we see what working group and the plenary session will do with this material, but I would say that probably we made some mistakes during this process. Just to mention one idea, I think
Sure.
we in the citizens' plan it should be more probably that we should find a format like Oxford debates. It's different position would be presented. It would be probably also better for political education of our citizens than this way in which it was managed.
Yeah, so would you say that indeed the expert panel is very, very one-sided? So to the listeners, the expert panel, or the sort of the name says itself, a panel of supposed experts that are there to inform the citizens, to help them debate, and they were selected, I think, by the executive board of the conference, right? And
yes. And on one hand, it should be it was announced that it is more direct democracy and we engage directly in citizens. But on the other hand, I think that there was a fear and probably the commission, but also the steering committee, and so wanted too much to control this kind of the discussion which they propose actually to the citizens. Yeah.
Okay, and would you say the whole exercise amounts to an echo chamber because of that?
Yes, yes. I would say so. If we see this recommendation, they are very close to some proposal of the mainstream parties in the parliament, and on the end also, let's say I am now in the working group on democracy. Our chair, Mr. Manfred Weber, is preparing a non-paper which should summarize the conclusion. But I had no impression that we really had a discussion about this, and I am afraid it would be actually the repetition of the position of this main parties and
yes,
in the parliament. And I think this is the same is also about proposal on the digital platform. So generally, I had the impression that that probably the people who had or the citizens that had a different opinion about the union, they just ignored all this process.
Okay. Yeah. And in terms of what, let's say, the dominant forces want to do with all of this, do you have an indication that they will try to present this as somehow legitimate, and then, for example, try to use it for the next European Parliament elections? I mean, my impression is that the idea of pan-European voting lists is something that they want to really push hard.
This is one of the examples. It is actually probably the most controversial, because there are some my colleagues from EPP party who are opposed to this from small countries, but there are other. There's the proposal to go to let's say in the foreign policy to majority votes. And so there are many also, I would say, wishful thinking in this recommendation, and I think it is a mistake that some of my colleagues, also from the EP delegation, also from the council, they consider this 800 citizens which were selected as a representative of the 100 millions of Europeans. And they would like to replace really the parliamentary democracy, which and election by this material, which which probably will be on the base of legitimacy of their own postulates in political postulates. And this is, for me, it was very characteristic. During the plenary session, we had the discussion. Nobody actually mentioned the elections as a main tools besides of the elections of European Parliament. But we also the governments, national parliaments are elected, and on the end we have in European Union and European countries this established institution of parliamentary democracy, which some people, some politicians, some MEPs would like to I would say to ignore, or to make a shortcut in this democratic processes. So, and this, I think it's dangerous. And one of most striking traits was the that this engagement of the citizens were so concerning the topics which were, I think, too much to detach for really the life of these people. So I think this citizens panel have a rationale in a situation in which we have regional interest, local interest, or we discuss or we put some problems and ask some questions, but not if there are just general information, the general values. For this, because then some of this recommendation has a very general character of the wishful thinking. We should protect climate, of course. We should, in which way? And as we said, that partly they are not realistic, and so we will see what now the politician will do with it.
Yes. Okay, very, very interesting. And maybe you can tell us a bit more about the conference hosted by the ECR Group this week on the Eastern Partnership.
As you probably know, we as a group, we took very seriously this conference of Future of Europe, and we organized a very successful PanEuropean campaign, Europe's Future, A New Hope. What we wanted to present our vision, and there were many MEPs and MPs and conservative intellectuals during this, and we are talking about secure borders and also security and also realistic climate protection, and also that sometimes we need less Europe, not always more Europe. And I think it was very successful, very interesting. But now we wanted to extend this dialogue, because for us it is important to remember that Europe is not the same as European Union.
Absolutely.
There are countries very close to us, European countries. These are the member of this Eastern Partnership. You would want it also to talk with the countries from Western Balkans. And this is actually the next step. So we plan our conference, the first one next about Eastern Partnership, and then the later about Western Balkans. And as you probably know, nowadays in this, especially it is of course hot topic, because it shows how that also the fate of the Europe is. Will be this war in Ukraine shows us that how important is this region.
So, Professor, then for another timely topic, the conflict, the terrible conflict that we are witnessing now in the Ukraine, with Russia engaging in unseen aggression against a country that is very close to the European Union, which has concluded this EU-Ukraine deal. There's quite a bit of trade. The population is, I think, quite pro-Western, even if in the West there's still not a democratic majority to allow them into the EU or into NATO. They clearly have made progress. And also maybe because of that, we now see this terrible Russian aggression. So, what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, first of all, we want before so many countries, German friends, France, so-called West, generally that Russia is a danger for Europe, and I think that now the surprise is totally ununderstandable because President Putin never hidden his motives to rebuild the empire, and we know how Russia is organized, how it treats own citizens. There were many murders, also the opponents of Putin abroad, in Great Britain and South Skripal, attacks on the attempt to kill the enemies of the President Putin. So it's and there was aggression. There was a war in Georgia. There was aggression in 2014 already. The occupation of Crimea, and also the war in of course, in a different scale, but the war in the eastern Ukraine. So generally it shouldn't be surprised, but besides of the really not very hardcore sanctions, and there was a still context and illusion about Russia and investment. Of course, very symbolic is Nord Stream 2. And I must say, we, as my political group, proposed many times in European Parliament a special debate about this, and there was always refused by EPP and the other major group. It was supported by ID and by Greens, and partly by Renew. But, so there was never a discussion in the European Parliament about very dangerous Russian influences in Europe. There are former leading politicians working for Russian companies. There are influential think tanks and so on. It was, we always considered this as a danger for security, and now there is a war on very close to border of the Union. We have already, I just heard the Polish information agency and TV that already 100,000 people, mostly the children and women, already crossed the border to Poland, and we.
Well, 100,000 in only 48 hours.
Yeah, yes. Probably there would be much more. And you see, there was an opinion that the Polish people are not inclined to receive refugees, and it's turned out that it's totally false appraisal in the situation, and there is a really war, and the war refugees, as I said, and where the men, as Ukrainians, so bravely fight for their country. We are also we are trying to be very helpful, also in different ways. So it's the questions, I think, for the European Union is the questions about if we once again ignore this lesson, and then probably my country could be the next, and I don't know, Baltic countries, or maybe Finland or Sweden or something like that. Some other countries, or we really come to the more realistic assessment of our situation and our policies. As far as we know now, the Ukrainians are very. The resistance is stronger than Russia expected, and
yes, looks like.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right, and in case we will see a massive refugee crisis, I mean, like you say, 100,000 people in 48 hours, and we may see guerrilla warfare, because the even if Putin ultimately wins, which is likely, he will struggle to occupy Ukraine, and maybe with guerrilla warfare, there will be even more refugees. And how do you see this? I mean, this is posing massive challenges for Europe, right?
Yes. Of course, immigration, but also I think we should also make clear that we are also in the situation. We are also would like and will be fight for our freedom and our country. So we have to make much more of our defense and as I say, so the refugees and support from Ukraine also. It's one thing. The other it is of course the also to take into account that the worst scenario in the future. And I think we made a mistake not to open up the better perspective for Ukraine to join, or to be closer to the Union, and it was connected with all this illusion concerning Russia and policy of Russia, and so now we need really the assessment of the situation, and I think that the Putin also he's sometimes described as some mad and crazy and irrational politician, but I think that he really recognized our weakness also after the retreat of Americans from Kabul, about the situation. We have election in France, we have very weak government in Germany, with all the mistakes that Germany also made during the last years, also during the Angela Merkel chancellorship. And so it was calculation, and I think in the he counts on our weakness. So now we should have to be strong. So I am very pleased that also now the American president rethink his position, and we are trying now to do more for our defense, and we will do this in Poland. So maybe we have a little to rethink our priorities, because we are really concentrated on some topics in the European policy, and sometimes is exaggerating with some problems, and as a sleepwalkers we didn't see this danger which was growing on our western eastern frontiers.
Yes, and maybe one more question on Russia. Like, if we would stop buying energy from Russia, which is an extreme measure which would inflict enormous pain economically, would this even help to stop the conflict?
Yeah, I think there is unprecedented aggression. It's really some compare this with the 30s, and also in rhetoric, and it's really so. Our response should be very decisive. So of course it would be not easy. Painful. Let us say this dependence on energy from Russia since many years was a mistake, and now we should, and I think it is possible in the Western world have to reorient our economy and also supply of energy, but there is no time to be now, to go halfway and to smite and all this sanction and all this hesitation. I do not understand this. It is not the time now for such appeasement policy, and we know how the appeasement policy actually ended in the 30s of the last century. So I cannot understand that this consideration, if there should be we should exclude Russia from the SWIFT system, or should this sanction also be applied personally to Putin and Lavrov. I think it is ridiculous. This is, if you see the scene from Kiev, then there is a war on really in Europe, because Ukraine is a European country, this European nation, and so it's solidarity and action now, not and anybody who now hesitates is actually supported this Russian aggression.
Well, thank you for that. Then one more topic I'd like you to discuss with you, last but not least, which is the relationship between Poland and the European Union. I mean, there's been lots of tensions, basically lawsuits, threats from, the EU leadership and other European countries to cut spending in retaliation of reforms that are deemed a violation of the rule of law in Poland. I mean, what's your take on this?
I would say, of course, we have as a country our own problems and deficiencies. But I think in no European country, democracy is perfect. And I know, I would say that in some countries, the independence of the judiciary is much more endangered than it is in Poland. Yeah, but I wouldn't say that there is no need to improve many things in Poland. We tried to reform our judiciary system. Not all these reforms are successful, and so. But this is on one side. This is, I think, rational discussion. But on the other hand, we have the fanatics in European Parliament, and the people who actually, I think, totally misunderstood the situation, and in their fanatism they found, I would say, personal mission, talking about backsliding democracy and authoritarian regime in Poland. I remember the situation in which Poland was compared directly with Russia. There are so many absurd accusations, and sometimes I thought that maybe it is also partly inspired from Moscow, because in order to make this conflict between Poland and the EU more and more stronger, and I do not see that in this situation. You see this money from recovery fund or for European budget, actually it should be for transformation of Polish economy. I think strong Poland, strong economically, also stable politically, and we had until now very stable government, and this is interest of whole Europe, and
yes.
And it was I don't know. It's sometimes if I look at Russia, I see also as a historian, somebody who is professor of sociology and humanities, a continuity of something, traits of the Russian political culture, Russia, this samodzierżawie, this inclination to despotism. It's not only Putin, but Putin is unfortunately also a symptom of the much more rooted in the historical problem of Russia. And sometimes I see the same as of course, different in type, but prejudices and historical inclination in our Western neighbors, which probably have some difficulties to acknowledge that Poland is also independent country with own possibility to make their own decision, to solve own Polish in the way which Polish people wish and how they, because we all know that the democratic election in Poland, there are some decision. We have a right to take this decision, and there are, especially if I look at some colleagues from the West with very little knowledge about Polish history, Polish culture, and too little respect, for East Central Europe and for democratic decision taking in this country. And this is actually, there's a danger for Europe. So talking also about the future of Europe, I think it should be based on respect, on mutual respect, and not to be to try to play the role of mentor. And if you were comparing this situation now, all the mistakes also in energy policy made by Germans, German governments, all this, also in immigration policy, and so I think we need much more, and we compare with this with much more realistic Polish policy. For instance, our endeavor in the attempts in the recent years to be more and more independent from the energy supply from Russia, from gas, and so it should be today appreciated. Also our contribution, our more and more spending for defense, our loyalty to NATO. And that, as I said, our now really great readiness to help the Ukraine. It should be assessed differently when we see that many people in the West hesitate in this situation. So it's. For me, it was very characteristic that during this crisis, there was a mission of the Libe and AFCO committee in Warsaw, in Poland, and I had the impression that they are really totally detached from the reality.
Yes. Well, okay. I think those are some really important points that when it comes to energy independence from Russia, making sure there's a strong defense, and of course, avoiding chaotic migration. It's absolutely true. And that Central and Eastern European nations, and especially Poland, that their voice has not been sufficiently taken into account, and to return to the topic of the conference on the future of Europe. This is actually, it can serve as proof how important it is not to have top-down decision making, but European Union where everybody is an equal and where the experience from bottom up is being respected. So that said, I would like to thank you very much for this podcast interview, Professor Krasnodębski. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
The Brussels Report podcast.